from the Shadwell tile beds to the radio tower at Rontry, from Breslin Hill to Boyer Rose Underground Station, broadcasting from a canal barge adrift on the current, 1 Thames bend east of Tower Bridge. This is London, building by building. A scattershot dive into the architectural past and present of the English capital, undertaken one building at a time. I am your guide, Sam Redlark. This week we will take a look at the Shield House in Islington, its patriotic riverside origins, its vegetable-pelted landlocked present, and its uncertain future as a boutique gymnasium. This episode is sponsored by Turpin's enamelling paste. For a glossy and long-lasting chip-free veneer, accept no substitute. A free applicator with all 1 litre tins while stocks last. Available in branches of Satchwell's Ironmongers. Or ask your local hardware store to stock Turpin's enamelling paste, the Boilermaker's choice. In the lobby of the London Guildhall, there is a wall plaque commemorating the metropolitan buildings that crumbled beneath the shadow of the Luftwaffe during the early years of World War II. A notable omission from this memorial is the copper cast statue of Lady Britannia, who for many decades stood mute sentry over Bermondsey docks, and who, at the moment of her destruction, under a barrage of German bombs, was transformed from a metaphor for British resilience to a literal protector, saving Wellington Wharf from fiery destruction. Herbert Huber, writing in his unintentionally psychedelic metropolitan travelogue, Reflections on a London Past, published in 1978 by Goswell Books, describes the statue as follows. Erected in March 1902 on a wind-blown promontory projecting from the southern bank of the River Thames, her reign was fated to be short. An unsung casualty of the Blitz, now 3 decades absent from the shoreline, her memory pulled from the minds of Londoners by tidal waters. Yet in her prime, she stood 150 feet tall, a half-sized statue of English liberty who gazed fixedly downriver into a permanent racing headwind, focused in perpetuity upon the distant estuarial horizon of the Thames seamouth, her gale-blown helmet plume riding a tide of wind-dragged curls, her long rain-green dress pulled into elemental creases, mirroring the creased face of the river. A dark monument when first cast, later transformed by the English weather to the lively roiling colour of the open sea. An unsheathed longsword, held in her lowered right arm, pointed outward from her waist in readiness. Her trident shaft bisected her heart from behind a kite shield, bearing an embossed likeness of the Union flag, and adorned along the top by a stone bat-winged encrustation. At Britannia's left flank, a reclining lion was posed rising to alertness on its front legs, its gaze drawn to the far-off approach of something, lost to the human eye within the bustling panorama. This unlikely pair, birthed from the London clay, now lie in state beneath the silted foundation of the river. A poignant and stirring quote there from Herbert Huber. Unlike a great many of the curiosities mentioned in Huber's London Guide that are at best unfounded rumours, the statue of Britannia was at one time firmly rooted in reality. It was constructed from a beaten copper skin, loosely wrapped around a coed stone core, and it once stood on an artificial peninsula overlooking the river docks east of Tower Bridge. His description fails to mention one of the more intriguing features of the statue, a compartment concealed within the left breast behind the shield that contains a small urn. This vessel is said to have housed the combined ashes of the hearts of Queen Victoria and her consort Prince Albert. Huber's allusion to the statue's final resting place is sadly accurate. On the evening of Sunday, the 2nd of February 1941, a volley of ordnance dropped by German aircraft, which would have undoubtedly destroyed the warehouses on Wellington Wharf, narrowly missed its intended target. The bombs detonated against Britannia's shield, toppling the monument, which sank into the soft mud of the riverbed, where it has remained ever since. The bat-winged encrustation, described by Tuber, that adorned the top of the shield, was not strictly a part of the statue, but rather an ornate balcony rail bordering a small patio. This raised section of the plinth was accessible via a steep staircase. It was used primarily as a lookout point by workers on the wharf to spot vessels approaching from downriver, allowing time to mobilize the warehouse crews. Astonishingly, this stone embellishment survived the explosion that sank the statue. It was catapulted by the blast onto neighbouring Trailer Wharf, where it struck the stairs leading to the water with such force that they were split down the middle. If you visit Trailer Stairs today, you can still discern where the wet cast stone was poured in to seal the gigantic crack. The shield head was apparently so heavy that the team of men who were sent to remove it instead gave serious consideration to pushing it down the final few steps and into the river. Fortunately, sensible heads prevailed. The crest was salvaged and was subsequently transported by omnibus to the gardens of Gray's Inn Square, where it was repurposed as an adornment to a raised flower bed. In 1947, the architect Robert Cressy was granted permission by the government to incorporate the shield head into a new building that he was planning to construct on the fringes of Islington. He promised that the piece would take up a prominent position within the facade. Work on the building commenced in 1949 and was completed by 1951. Cressy House, to give the holding its formal title, occupies a commanding vantage point facing onto the busy bend of Appley Road, one of the conduits that funnel traffic to and from the West End of the capital. When I first visited this area of London during the mid-1990s, the Shield House, as it had become known locally, was a perennial target of casual vandals who would attempt to pelt the stone crest with fruit and vegetables. This custom was started by members of the Gaudium Society in Soho. It was intended to commemorate the deflection of the German bombs from Wellington Wharf by Britannia's shield, and took place on the anniversary of the air raid. Thanks in large part to both positive and negative coverage in the London press, the activity soon gained a more public footing. By unspoken mutual consensus, it expanded to incorporate other holidays of national importance, such as St. George's Day. The tradition has even, unfortunately, found its way into some travel guidebooks. This has made the Shield House an unlikely target for tourists, who will often plead ignorance when efforts are made to point out to them the signs requesting that visitors do not throw objects at the building. For many years, matters were not helped by the presence of a street market on neighbouring Suckling Lane. The fruit and vegetable stand, which was run by Alfred Fishpool, and which had been in the same family for 5 generations, became a ready source of ammunition for those wishing to target the shield head. The conservatoire that occupied the Shield House between 1955 and 2012 predictably suffered many broken windows. In 1982, the owners unsuccessfully attempted to sue the Fishpool family, arguing that the produce they sold was responsible for the majority of the damage. When the market on Suckling Lane closed in 1997, Fishpool relocated his business to Camden Market, a few miles north. The stall remains there to this day, under the management of his granddaughter Louisa, a former oncology consultant at Guy's Hospital who fancied a change of career. In the market's absence, the bombardment of the Shield House continued unabated, with fruit and vegetables apparently being acquired from other venues. Following the closure of the music school, which had been in decline for several years, the Shield House was occupied by an outdoor activities store. When the business folded, 2 years later, in 2014, the property stood derelict for half a decade. In October 2019, it was purchased by the William Blackwell Leisure Group, who have plans to convert it into a boutique gymnasium. This will entail the construction of a new building behind the iconic facade of its predecessor. These plans have drawn concerns from architectural conservationists. They claim that the facade relies too much upon supporting walls within the main structure for its integrity and may collapse if they are removed. As for Britannia, 2 attempts have been made to raise her from her watery resting place beneath the soft bed of the River Thames. The first occurred in June 1955, when a pair of dredgers failed to drag the statue into shallower water. More recently, in 1997, a plan to winch the statue onto a floating platform also failed. During this attempt, it was discovered that tidal forces had shifted the resting place of Britannia a further 17 metres downriver, in the approximate vicinity of Bishop's Lane Stairs. Margaret Goody, who stood as an independent candidate for the 2015 Stepney Council by-election, promised that if she was voted into office, she would spearhead the recovery of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's ashes from the compartment in the statue's left breast. Evidently, voters did not regard the proposed salvage operation as an important issue, as on polling day, Goody trailed behind the rest of the pack in last place. At the time of this recording, Britannia remains under the Thames, in slow tidal transition towards the sea. The Shield House remains in planning application purgatory, while the local authorities debate whether its facade can stand up to the weight of the future that has been rested upon its shoulders. I have been Sam Redlark. Next time on London, Building by Building, I will examine the caged tableau of the Garden of Eden at St Lidwina's Church in Holborn, and discuss similar examples in other churchyards elsewhere in the capital. Until then, goodbye.